June 1, 2022, evening. Sunny. Looking at the unfamiliar face in the mirror, Chen Yu's expression was slightly bitter. Although he started trying to adapt to this new identity 3 days ago, it is still a little difficult to get used to today. I have to say, this face is very attractive. Thick but not rough eyebrows, delicate peach eyes, and a high nose bridge are impeccable. Although the cheeks are slightly longer and the chin is slightly pointed, it gives him a European and American three-dimensional sense and a full sense of youth. However, this face did not hit Chen Yu's aesthetic. What he prefers is the appearance of Peng Yuan and Wu Yanzu's male hormones, but God gave him a Edison Chen-style appearance. That's right, this face has 6 or 7 points like Teacher Chen. If you add the signature smile, it will be more like it. This face is not his, at least in Chen Yu's memory, this face is not his. 3 days ago, he was an art student who had just graduated from college. Because of his poor homework in his early years, his parents paid a lot of money to make him a member of the flood of art students, focusing on art, and finally relying on the bonus of professional courses. Attended a third-rate university. After graduating, he originally thought that he would find an ordinary job as a graphic designer, then marry an ordinary woman and have a child, and finally live an ordinary life. However, God played a huge joke on him. He crossed. 3 days ago, when he woke up, he found that he had changed from a young man in his early 20s to a student in the 3rd year of high school, and his family environment had also changed, from both parents to a lonely one. He became an orphan. Not only that, his appearance has also changed, his name has also changed, and now his name is Chen Yu, not Chen Yu. Even the world has changed. There is no China, the United States, Japan, and South Korea, and there is only a world with a brand new structure headed by the 4 major countries of the East, West, South, and North. And the country he is in now is the East country, and the race is not much different from the yellow race in the previous life. Taking his eyes away from the mirror, Chen Yu once again observed his residence. This is a cheap rental house, only about 10 square meters in size. Although it is not large, there are independent toilets and air conditioners, and the room is not bad. Clean, indicating that the previous owner of this body was not sloppy. However, after occupying the magpie's nest for 3 days, a lot of garbage was added to this room, and the room always smelled of sauerkraut and instant noodles. Looking at everything in front of him, Chen Yu sighed silently. Since it's here, let's be safe, no matter what, let's live well. He slowly opened the door and saw that the door to the door was wide open. Although it was already evening, there were still many strangers coming in and out, and a white couplet was posted on the door next door. Someone died. Not only that, but across the door, he also saw that the room opposite had been designed to look like a morning hall. Inside the door was a paper figure in a straight suit, with a weird and stiff smile on the corner of his mouth. And facing the door is a portrait of a man in black and white. He can even see the corner of the urn behind the portrait, and the sobbing coming from the door. Chen Yu still remembered that the tenant was a husband and wife, the man's name was Li Deshun, and the woman's name was Ji Furong. The husband and wife had already reached middle age, but they had no children. Yesterday, the other's wife knocked on his door and asked him. Have not seen her husband. Unexpectedly, in just 1 day, the couple will be separated by yin and yang, and even the ashes will be burned. However, this paper figure is quite unique. It seems to represent the dead. Is it a unique custom in this world? Chen Yu guessed silently. Without stopping too much, Chen Yu turned around and went downstairs, bought a bag of instant noodles and a bag of mustard from the canteen downstairs, and then quickly returned. His rental house is located in an urban village called Mingxianli. The house is a self-built house with only 3 floors, and he rents a standard room on the 3rd floor. When he returned home at this time, he sat back in front of the old computer and continued to search the internet for all kinds of information in this world. This is what he has been preparing for 3 days. Because he found that while inheriting this body, he did not inherit the memory of the other party. Today, he is like an old antique who is out of touch with the times and has no understanding of the world. Maybe, this world that looks the same as the previous life, there might actually be some hidden inside story. As a newcomer, he couldn't help but have all kinds of fantasies in the web novels of his previous life. What about becoming a god, cultivating immortals, magic fighting chi, and even Thulhu? It's a pity that after checking the data for 3 days, Chen Yu still didn't find any clues about the transcendent. He didn't have the golden finger that the traveler must have, and he didn't get involved in the crisis-ridden world that the traveler must go to. This world seems to be as ordinary as the previous life. The only thing worth noting is that all countries in the world seem to be very interested in launching lunar probes. However, what does launching a lunar probe have to do with Chao Zhou? Just when he was a little disappointed and in a daze, the 1,000 yuan machine in his pocket suddenly vibrated. Chen Yu slowly took it out and looked at it, but saw the note on the caller ID that read Wang Feng's class instructor, and immediately understood that it was the original class teacher who called again. Unlike the class guides of other classes, the class guide in Chen Yu's class is a physical education teacher. "Hey, class director." Chen Yu picked up the phone and tried to appear weaker. "What's the matter with you?" "My fever is finally gone today, and I can probably go back to school tomorrow, you." "It's okay, I just called and asked." The class director's voice seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. "It's good that the fever is gone. After all, you are also in the 3rd year of high school, and the college entrance examination will be in a few days. It is a major event in your life, so you can't be sloppy. Don't worry, class guide, I have been reviewing at home these days." Chen Yu nodded and said politely, "I made you worry." "No big deal." The class guide laughed and seemed a little hesitant to say anything. "I know your family's circumstances are special, and because of your illness, I have specially applied for a sickness allowance from the school. Remember to come to my office to fill in the form when you arrive at school tomorrow." "An application form? No problem." Chen Yu's eyes lit up when he heard the words, "I'm really bothering you." "It's okay. By the way, you didn't spread the word about what happened that day, right? Remember, don't disclose any information on the internet. If the school investigates, your student status will become a problem. Do you understand?" "I understand." Chen Yu frowned, but still answered without hesitation. Seeing Chen Yu's decisive answer, he also hung up the phone with confidence. After hearing the busy tone from the opposite side, Chen Yuki slowly put down the phone, showing a thoughtful look. This is the 3rd time the class guide has called. He came to this world 3 days ago, and the other party called him 3 times. At first, he thought that the class director was a warm-hearted person who cared about his students, but at the end of every phone call, the other party would deliberately exhort him like this. This is somewhat intriguing. He opened the call log on his mobile phone. The class guide Wang Feng had spoken to him more than 10 times, perhaps because he was an orphan, so he had a lot of care, but it was not as frequent as once a day. But it has been once a day for the past 3 days. In addition, there is an unfamiliar landline number in the call log. This number came from 4 days ago, that is, the day before he passed through. Chen Yu checked through the internet, but found that it was the 5th college in H city where he was located. The landline number of the political and religious office. What on earth was it that allowed the political and educational office to call you personally, and asked the head teacher to instruct you for 3 days in a row? And that subsidy also made Chen Yu smell unusual. Moreover, Chen Yu did not apply for this leave. When he woke up from here on the first day, he received a call from the class guide, and only learned from the call that this body had taken a sick leave yesterday. So, does the original owner of this body seem to have died because of this disease, and then welcomed him? Chen Yu guessed silently. As for other information about this body, such as the life experience of the orphan and the identity of the current 3rd-year high school student, he also found it on the student registration website, UUganshu www.uuganshu.com, and the student password is placed in a diary next to the computer. The original owner of this body seems to have a weird little hobby and likes to write a diary, which makes Chen Yu doubt that the original body is not a serious person. After all, who is a serious person who writes a diary? This body's diary not only records the password of his student status, but also his own various social software passwords, as well as 2 bank account passwords, etc. Thanks to these, Chen Yu can successfully inherit the legacy of the original body, instead of there will be flaws that shouldn't be exposed. Moreover, it seems that this body has been keeping a diary for quite some time. There are thick stacks of diaries on the desk, and even the drawers are full of them, at least 20 or 30. Looking at the stacks of old and new diaries in front of him, it provided Chen Yu with a lot of convenience, allowing him to understand what kind of person the original body was from the diary. But looking at it, Chen Yu felt a little weird. In the latest diary, many pages were missing. These pages were all torn off, leaving shallow stubble marks, but the missing pieces of paper couldn't find it. Under what kind of circumstances would the original body rip off his diary? Chen Yu couldn't help but feel a little puzzled, but unfortunately he tried to rummage through the entire rental house, but couldn't find the missing answers. But now, Chen Yu has some understanding of the original body information, but when he arrives in class tomorrow, I am afraid it will still be a little tricky. After all, there are so many people in the class, and there should be friends and acquaintances with this body, so Chen Yu can't do anything about these people. Thinking of this, Chen Yu had to open the diary again and began to rummage through the clues left by the original body. The more you know about the original owner of this body, the less likely it will be a problem at a critical time. Soon, Chen Yu turned to the last diary entry 3 days ago. This is the last imprint of the original body in this world. Unlike the previous diary, the handwriting in this diary is obviously much more scribbled. Not only that, but the content inside is also very strange. May 29, 2022, sunny, crossed out, overcast. On this day, I didn't expect such a thing to happen, he was actually in front of me. Crossed out, I can't believe it's all true, it's so scary. No, I don't want to stay at school anymore, I have to leave. I was crazy to bring it back, am I about to die? Is it true or false, or is it his prank? No, that thing cannot be left to others, I have to find a way to destroy it, otherwise. Crossed out, it's so painful, what should I do? Chen Yu glanced at the words, but couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth. The most crucial information was crossed out. He didn't know what was wrong with the original body. Writing is the same as not writing. But obviously, on the last day, Yuan Shi seemed to have encountered something at school, which made him very upset, so he could only ask the class teacher for leave and escaped back home. And, he seems to have brought something back from school. Chen Yu narrowed his eyes and fell into contemplation. He looked around the room, looking for what the original body brought back. I have to say that when he first came to this body 3 days ago, he checked the entire room, even the bottom of the bed and the back of the bedboard were not leaked, but nothing abnormal was found. Thinking of this, he turned on the phone again and opened the call records, but found that the call records on this old mobile phone were pitiful. The one with the most calls was the note Wang Feng's class guide, with more than 10 call records. The second place is the landlord's remarks, with 6 call records. Then, there was a note called Squad Leader Zhang Xin with 2 call records. 80% of the calls are related to these 3 notes. Could it be that he refers to the squad leader Zhang Xin? Chen Yu thought silently, but hesitantly. Zhang Xin's name is a woman, and she should not be able to tell the difference between male and female. But apart from these 3 people, the rest of the call records were either 10,086 or some odd numbers. No clues could be found on the mobile phone, so Chen Yu checked the records of social software, but most of these social software were some netizens. The original speech could not be found in the group. In addition, he also looked at the historical browsing records of the web page, and there were 2 websites with colors in it, and there was nothing worth noting. The thread was suddenly disconnected. It's just that Chen Yu was still a little surprised. After all, with this handsome face, he didn't make any friends, not even female classmates. It was unbelievable. But when he thought of the meager clothes in the closet, and the old and even shoddy t-shirts on his body, Chen Yu had some understanding. However, Yuan Shi's character is somewhat similar to him, both belong to the type of stuffy gourd. He has already experienced it firsthand. No matter how handsome he looks, this kind of character will not help. Anyway, let's talk about it after school tomorrow. Thinking of this, Chen Yu sighed and turned off the computer, and hurriedly finished the instant noodles. Looking at the time, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening, and he immediately lay back on the bed, ready to turn off the lights to sleep. However, just as he lay down, his body suddenly bounced up like a conditioned reflex. Because of the angle, after lying down, he saw what looked like a notebook in the crack of the main computer box. Found it! In the middle of nowhere, a light flashed in Chen Yu's mind. He seemed to have found what the original body brought back from the school. He threw himself in front of the computer host, put his fingers into the gap between the host computer and the table, and sure enough he touched a furry book. This is it! Chen Yu quickly pumped. Immediately, a book with frizz, as if woven from countless hair strands, was pulled out. What? Instead, Chen Yu was taken aback by this thing. He quickly pulled back his hand and looked at it suspiciously, only to realize that the thing in front of him seemed to be a notebook. A book is made of countless hair strands on the cover, without any text, and inside is a page of notes. Chen Yu stared blankly at the notebook. The shape of the notebook was too weird. The cover was actually woven from hair, and it felt a little scary to the touch. He tried to flip through the notebook, but found that the paper inside the notebook was white. It was dazzling, like the most flawless and best suet jade. This. Seeing this, Chen Yu couldn't help being a little confused. Although the material of this notebook is really good, it has nothing to do with the words recorded in the original diary, right? He didn't give up and continued to turn back, but he didn't find any useful words or clues until he turned to the last page. And many more. Suddenly, Chen Yu was stunned. He felt that he had turned to the last page of the notebook, but when he continued to turn it, it was a new page, and he never saw the back cover of the notebook. Chen Yu didn't give up and continued to turn back, but after the last page was still a new page, no matter how he turned it 10, 20 or 30 times, he still couldn't see the back cover of the notebook. This is actually a notebook that will never be finished. At this moment, Chen Yu only felt a thumping throbbing in his heart. He couldn't tell what kind of feeling it was. He just mechanically turned pages and pages. Looking at the new pages constantly emerging, Chen Yu was even more surprised to find that no matter how many pages he turned, the thickness of the notebook did not change. Since it can't be finished, how about tearing it off? Chen Yu had such a thought again in his mind. Of course, he didn't really want to tear up this notebook, but wanted to take a look. If this notebook is really so magical, can't it be torn up too? Thinking of this, he didn't do it for a while, randomly selected a page of paper, and tore it down with his right hand. Swish! What surprised him was that this page was really torn off easily, and the fracture was neat. It doesn't look like it was torn off, but it looks like it was cut with a paper cutter. That's it. Chen Yu stared at the notebook in front of him in a daze, but before he could regain his senses, an inexplicable burning sensation suddenly came from his right hand. He looked at it reflexively, but saw that the torn page of paper actually ignited without fire. Moreover, the flame is still eerily black. Chen Yu was startled, and hurriedly threw the burning paper out, but the paper floated on the bed as if nothing was there. Oops! Chen Yu instinctively wanted to slap the top of the bed, but the next second the page was completely burnt. Not only that, there were no burn marks on the sheets, not even paper dust. Only the torn paper will burn, and won't the burning ignite the things around you? Chen Yu murmured in a trance, what's the reason, is it really a supernatural event? Thinking of this, Chen Yu was not willing to continue tearing, but turned back to the cover of the notebook, thought about it, and tried to tear it at the corner of the cover. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. However, unlike the paper inside, the cover made of hair was far tougher than Chen Yu expected. It couldn't be torn or even bent. Can't the cover be destroyed? Chen Yu was a little surprised. For such a notebook with an infinite number of pages, the number of pages does not have any meaning, and the cover represents the frame of the notebook, and destroying the frame means destroying the notebook body. If it is really a supernatural being, then it is reasonable that it cannot be destroyed by conventional means. Chen Yu's eyes gradually brightened. The infinite pages of paper, the indestructible cover, and the self-burning black flames all prove the nature of this notebook beyond physics and reality. This is a real supernatural notebook. Like a 50 million jackpot lottery ticket, and a world power within reach, this notebook is being presented naked in front of Chen Yu at this moment, and Chen Yu can only feel an indescribable ecstasy rising from the depths of his heart. It made the cells in his whole body tremble and boil. Calm down. He quickly took a deep breath, and at the same time got up and kept pacing. Chen Yu waited until he gradually calmed down before returning to the desk. Now that the supernatural properties of this notebook have been determined, the next step is to verify its function. Thinking of this, Chen Yu immediately wanted to write his name on the cover to verify whether the notebook needed to be identified by this method, but when he got the pen, his hand froze slightly. Because he suddenly remembered a certain movie from the previous life. If this is the note in that kind of movie, and writing his name on it, wouldn't it be like playing a lantern in the toilet courting death? Since you can't use your own name to verify it, then you can use blood. Thinking of the plots in those fantasy novels, Chen Yu immediately bit his finger and dropped a drop of blood on the cover of the notebook. But what he didn't expect was that the drop of blood didn't mean to seep into the paper at all, but instead presented a perfect dot, suspended quietly on the surface. Chen Yu was a little embarrassed. He wiped it reluctantly, and the drop of blood was immediately wiped off, and as expected, no wet marks were left on the cover. Isn't he also confessing to the Lord with a drop of blood? Chen Yu looked thoughtful. He thought for a while, then picked up a gel pen and tentatively wrote a line on the cover. How can I, a death rusher, drink this chicken soup? After finishing writing, Chen Yu waited, but nothing happened. Even when he stretched out his palm and wiped it lightly, all the black pen oil ran onto his palm, and the cover of the notebook was still spotless. This. Chen Yu couldn't help but feel a little troubled, but he just thought for a moment, then opened the notebook the next second and continued to write a line on the first page. Sichuan me, but I'm really going to be angry. And this time, the change finally appeared. The moment he wrote this sentence, Chen Yu's eyes were lost for a moment. When he came back to his senses, an indescribable piece of knowledge filled his mind. This is a notebook for compiling weird stories. Write any text on the note, and a contract will be signed with the note unless the contractor dies. The contract will not expire after signing the contract. You can write weird stories on your notes with any pen, and the weird stories you write will come true. There is only one price for signing a contract, and that is all the lifespan of the contractor. In the future, contractors can obtain the power to create strange stories, and through the spread of strange stories, they can collect strange stories and extend their lifespan. This piece of knowledge kept reverberating in his mind, causing Chen Yu's complexion to change slightly, especially the last two sentences, which made him look unsightly. All the future life, what are you kidding? Chen Yu closed the note again and looked at the cover of the note, only to see that a scribbled text appeared on the cover at some point. Contractor, Chen Yu, 13, lifetime, 0 reading, 0 strange talk factor, joy 100, anger 100, sadness 100, resentment 100, fear 100. Message: Human's heart of exploring the unknown will always be the best helper for the spread of strange stories. Chen Yu only felt that he was in a terrible mood at this time, especially the word lifespan is 0, which seemed to be tinged with blood, which made his heart sink completely. Is this the so-called start? Chen Yu couldn't help laughing bitterly. He deliberately looked at the column of contractors on the notebook. When he saw that Chen Yu was written on it instead of Chen Yu, the only fluke in his heart disappeared completely. Since he came to this world, he has not revealed his name to anyone. This man was originally called Chen Yu, but now it is Chen Yu in his notebook, which makes Chen Yu feel even more chilled. Does this ghost even know that he is not the original Chen Yu? It seems that I finally know how the original body died. Chen Yu couldn't help trembling all over. He could imagine that because the original body had the habit of writing a diary, it was very likely that he would write on this notebook as soon as he came into contact with it, and he immediately became a sad contractor, and then there. His life was sucked up by the notebook. And now, he has also followed in the footsteps of his original body. No, there is still a chance. Chen Yu murmured in a low voice. He was not completely desperate, and there were still the rules of the notebook in his mind. The rules of this notebook were very simple, that is, to create strange stories, and then collect the factors of the strange stories, you can extend your life. Also, I remember that I woke up in the afternoon 3 days ago, at around 1400 hours, which means that the original body's death time was before 1400 hours that day. And his diary shows that he had signed a contract with the notes when he was at school the day before, and the school's next self-study time is 2100 hours, which means that I have at least 17 to 24 hours of buffer time. However, what does the 13 after my name mean? Age? But I'm 24 years old, and even this body is 18 years old. Chen Yu murmured, shaking the gel pen, and quickly opened the cover of the note. It was only then that Chen Yu realized that even the paper in the notebook had changed. On the blank side of the first page, several lines of blood-colored words appeared: name, the name of the strange talk definition, strange talk an idea, the root of its existence in the world is the most basic rule declaration, a placeholder command issued to the origin of the world when it is necessary to communicate physical rules architecture, the main body of the strange talk, the origin parameters, startup budget, can be omitted trigger, conditions for the trigger of strange talk, and on the back of this page, there is a line of words drawing, strange talk about image design, can be omitted. Looking at everything on the notes, Chen Yu couldn't help but feel a little dazed, and the pen he picked up for a while didn't know how to drop it. Definitions, declarations, schemas, parameters. Chen Yu pondered all this silently, and then his heart moved, he gritted his teeth, and there was a look of cruelty in his eyes. Since he wants to play, let's play bigger. So he decisively wrote to it, name, good and evil reward definition. If there is a cause, there will be an effect, good will be rewarded with good, evil will be rewarded with evil. Declaration, every choice in life adds a weight to the scale of the ending, one end is good, the other is evil. At this moment, Chen Yu actually wanted to add a rule to this world that good and evil will be rewarded in the end. After writing these 3 lines, cold sweat broke out on Chen Yu's forehead. He stared at the 3 lines of words, and after confirming that there was no wrong word, he turned to the 4th line. I can understand the first 3 lines. If you think of creating weird stories as making up a story, then name is the name of the story, and definition and declaration are the idea of the story and the logic of the story. Then, what is the architecture in the 4th line? After thinking about it, Chen Yu tentatively wrote this sentence: architecture, everyone has their own life, and everyone's story is different. Some people take the road of kindness, while others embark on the road of crime. However, before the writing was finished, Chen Yu found that the pen in his hand was unable to write. He continued to write without giving up, but found that the gel pen could not continue to leave any traces on the notebook no matter what. Not only that, the words written in this line are also disappearing, as if they were erased by an invisible person, but within a few seconds, the entire line of words completely disappeared. Am I misunderstood? Architecture, since it is the main body and origin of word talk, how should it be written? Chen Yu thought for a while, then tried again to write, good people will get good rewards, and evil people will have their own evil. However, before it was finished, this line of words disappeared again. Wrong, all wrong. Until now, Chen Yu finally gave up. It seems that this notebook cannot directly create rules, but can only be limited to one story. That being the case, Chen Yu didn't plan to try any more. He tore off the first page without any hesitation. Wow! This page was cut at the root, and then it burned quickly in Chen Yu's hands, releasing a strange black flame, which was extinguished immediately. Since I have to create a story, wouldn't the next door be a good experimental subject? It also allows me to intuitively see the function of this notebook. Chen Yu couldn't help turning his head and looked in the direction of the gate. At this time, even though the gate was across, he could faintly hear the sound of crying over there. It was the voice of Li Deshun's relatives and friends. Thinking of this, Chen Yu wrote again, name, resurrection. Definition, everyone has a nostalgia for their own home. Declaration, the deceased also have a nostalgia for their home, and their souls can be guided to find their home. Framework, a working man died, but he couldn't let go of his wife, so he planned to return to his home that night from the day he died. After filling out the first 4 items, Chen Yu paused again to see if the compilation this time would be called back by the notebook, but Chen Yu waited for a while, but there was still no movement on the notebook. That being said, the strange talk notes you wrote this time were admitted? Chen Yu was slightly relieved, and then he looked at the following items. Parameters, that is, the budget for starting the weird talk. Chen Yu couldn't help looking at the cover of the notebook, and saw that in the strange talk factor row, the 5 values of joy, anger, sadness, resentment, and fear were all 100, and the strange talk notes told him when he signed the contract before that these things were the spread of strange stories. Elements that can be collected later. At the same time, it is also necessary to create weird stories. After hesitating for a while, Chen Yu finally did not fill in this parameter. Since the above said that it can be skipped, then let the strange talk notes be extracted by yourself. Anyway, there are only so many. Thinking of this, Chen Yu looked at the trigger column again, and after thinking for a while, he tried to fill in the word all, but the all word for all was not finished, and the notebook could not continue. Write it down. Sure enough, if you fill in all, it means that every working male in the world can return to his soul after death, which is basically equivalent to creating a new rule. Either the strange talk notes can't be done, or the strange talk factor is not enough. Chen Yu shook his head and then wrote down the words Li Deshun. Now that it's directly specific to me, it shouldn't cost too much weirdness factor, right? After writing all this, Chen Yu turned over the first page and looked at the back of the first page. There was only one column on UU reading www.yukansha.com drawing, strange talk about image design, can be omitted now that the target has been designated. There should be no need to waste time drawing the characters. Besides, the situation is urgent, and I may die at any time. Chen Yu thought silently, and then carefully recalled the rules in his mind. After the creation of the strange story, it is very simple to make it take effect, that is, close the note. As long as all the edited items are established, then the weird talk will automatically take effect, otherwise nothing will happen. Try it, success or failure is here. Chen Yu thought for a while, and was about to close the strange talk notes, but suddenly paused again. He quickly turned back to the first page and added the words Dongguo H Citizen Zion Li Community before Li Deshun in the trigger column. In this way, the problem of duplicate names will be ruled out. After thinking about it, Chen Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Now that his lifespan is 0, he may die on the spot at any time. Otherwise, he would not let Li Deshun appear tonight as if he was going to the market. After all, according to the folk tradition of the last life, the dead are also the head seven will be back. Now everything is ready, success or failure is here. Thinking of this, Chen Yuzhong overlapped the notes. Bang! Almost at the moment of closing the book page, Chen Yu only felt an inexplicable heart palpitation hit him. He couldn't help but look at the note in his hand, but saw a few lines on the cover of the strange talk note flashing like an electronic screen. Bloody text. Judgment: the above conditions are met, the definition is true and exists, there is no causal conflict between the definition and the statement, the number of strange factor points is sufficient, and the structure and trigger have no logical conflict. Execution: after the 10-second countdown, the strange story of return to the soul will take effect. An inexplicable coldness came from the notebook in his hand. This coldness was not the coldness in temperature, but a gloomy cold that penetrated into his bones. This inexplicable coldness continued to invade Chen Yu's heart, making his bang bang. Even, Chen Yu seemed to see the hairs on the cover wiggling slightly, like a tangle of worms. It wasn't until the 10-second countdown ended that the coldness gradually faded away. Is it over? Chen Yu put his mind away and looked at the note in his hand again, but saw that some changes had appeared on it. Contractor, Chen Yu, 13, lifetime, 0 reading, 0 strange talk factor, joy 100, anger 0, sadness 100, resentment 0, fear 100. Message: human's heart of exploring the unknown will always be the best helper for the spread of strange stories. In the column of strange talk factors, resentment and anger have become 0? Chen Yu was stunned for a moment. He still remembered that when he became a contractor, all 5 items had 100 points, but now he created a ghost story, but only deducted anger and resentment. What is the reason? For some reason, an ominous premonition suddenly appeared in Chen Yu's heart. Just when he was puzzled, there was a sudden burst of screams from next door. What? These screams came one after another, accompanied by the sound of the crowd fleeing. Chen Yu couldn't help but look at the door. He understood that this was that Li Deshun who started to return to his soul. If I go out to make soy sauce now, it shouldn't be affected, right? Chen Yu walked slowly to the front door, hesitantly wanted to go out and have a look, but the original vermilion lacquer door, which was ordinary, now seemed to be some kind of beast, which made him hesitant to take a step. Ling Ai, once this forbidden word appears in a person's heart, it is like a maggot in the tarsus, and it can't be thrown away again. Is the thing created by the strange talk notes really the so-called supernatural? Chen Yu took a deep breath. He understood that sooner or later, he was bound to the strange talk notes. If he backed down today, he might not have such a good opportunity next time. I have to figure out what the strange talk notes are created by. Thinking of this, Chen Yu gritted his teeth and opened the door fiercely. Wow! At the moment when the door was opened, Chen Yu only felt an indescribable coldness hit his face. You must know that it is obviously midsummer now, and although it is approaching late at night, the sweltering heat has not subsided, but today is mixed with a chilling chill in the midst of this hot and dry. He endured this strange gap and looked towards his opposite door, only to see that the opposite door was still wide open, but the lights in the room were turned off, and there was no one in silence. It seemed that all those who came to mourn were gone. With the screams one after another just now, he escaped. And that gloomy coldness that can penetrate into one's bones came from the door of this family. Chen Yu swallowed and walked towards the opposite door step by step. Soon, by the lights in the corridor, the strange black and white portrait of neighbor Li Deshun came into view again. Wei Tan also turns off the lights, is it so particular about it? Chen Yu thought silently. He walked into the door step by step, and by the light of the corridor, the whole room could be seen at a glance. At this time, the only possible place to hide people is the bathroom. Chen Yu didn't hesitate, he continued to walk towards the bathroom, no matter what, he also wanted to see what could be created by the strange talk notes. However, Just as he walked to the door of the bathroom, Chen Yu suddenly stopped, because he saw that the door of the bathroom was also open, but there was a dark figure standing there quietly. Through the lights in the corridor, he could faintly see that it was the shadow of a woman. Ji Furong? The figure of this woman quickly flashed through Chen Yu's mind. This was Li Deshun's wife. He still remembered that, unlike Li Deshun's appearance as a peasant, Ji Furong was over 40, but she still had her charm. The charm of a mature woman. But at this moment, Ji Furong's figure stood blankly in the dark bathroom, neither running nor making trouble, just standing blankly like that. The situation is not right. Chen Yu stopped. All her relatives were scared away, but she stood alone in the dark room, which was too contrary to the logic of normal people. No matter how you looked at it, it was very abnormal. Not only that, the gloomy cold was also eroding Chen Yu's body at this time, making it difficult for him to even breathe. There seemed to be a piece of ice stuck in his lungs, and every breath had an inexplicable coldness. Moreover, as he got closer to the shadow, goosebumps gradually appeared on Chen Yu's body. It seemed that his body's instinct was warning him that the things ahead were definitely dangerous. Faced with this situation, Chen Yu instead gave up the idea of continuing to investigate. No matter how you look at it, that black shadow doesn't look like a good person. Whether she is Ji Furong or Li Deshun, there must be a big problem at this time, and in short, she will never be a normal person. Thinking of this, Chen Yu was resolute. He began to move towards the door a little bit, while his eyes were fixed on the figure in the bathroom, for fear that the next second, the other party would scream and jump out like in the movie. However, until he exited the room and returned to his own door, this did not happen. Hey! No response. Chen Yu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He took one last look at the dark room, and finally turned around and closed the door. Boom! The door was closed heavily, isolating the coldness of the corridor. He did not see that Ji Furong, who was standing in the bathroom next door, was staring at Chen Yu with empty eyes, and at the same time, there was a strange smile on her pale face. Like a paper man. Chen Yu, who returned to the room, wiped his forehead subconsciously, and only then did he realize that his whole body was wet with cold sweat. He listened for a while through the door, but there was still no movement from the next door until the past 4 or 5 minutes. Then came the sound of sirens. It seems that some of those who escaped have called the police. Chen Yu was not surprised by this. He waited for a while, and sure enough, he heard the sound of rushing upstairs, and at the same time, there were many men shouting. Chen Yu opened a crack in the door slightly, only to see that the lights next door came on again at some point, and then 4 or 5 policemen rushed in at the same time, and soon there were bursts of chatter in the room. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. After a while, the sound of an ambulance came from downstairs. Could it be that Ji Furong was frightened and fainted by her reviving husband? Chen Yu scratched his head a little ashamed. There was nothing he could do. He only had a dozen hours left in his lifespan, and the reason for the strange talk was limited, so he really had no other goals. But then, the conversation between the police and the emergency personnel completely dispelled Chen Yu's thoughts. "Doctor, a corpse was found in the room. We checked it out. It was a woman named Ji Furong, who seemed to have died suddenly due to an excessive surge of adrenaline." What? Ji Furong is dead? Chen Yu only felt her scalp tingle. If Ji Furong was already dead, who was the shadow she saw in the bathroom just now? Besides, why did Ji Furong die? Isn't she Li Deshun's wife? Could it be that Li Deshun felt that it was too lonely down there, so he took his wife away when he returned to his soul? It doesn't make sense. Chen Yu was a little speechless and a little ashamed. In this way, wouldn't it mean that he killed the other party? Confused, Chen Yu opened the strange talk notes again, only to find that a new line of text appeared at the bottom of the strange talk he had written before. It was a line of comments: "The resentment cannot be quelled, and the humiliation cannot be healed. He returned with resentment and anger, just to turn into a moth to fight the flames and settle everything that night. Returned to the soul. The moment he saw this sentence, Chen Yu's expression changed. For some reason, the moment he saw the phrase moths fighting the flames, a thought that was completely unaware before flashed in Chen Yu's mind. Why did the paper figurines placed in the morning hall disappear? June 2, 2022, early morning. Sunny. Chen Yu was awakened by the sound of a crisp bird chirping. He picked up the mobile phone beside his pillow in a daze and glanced at it, only to find that the alarm clock on the mobile phone rang, and the time was fixed at 7:05 in the morning. There was a momentary daze in front of him, but then he woke up. This was his fourth day in this world. I promised the class guide today that I'm going to school. Chen Yu immediately got up, ran to the toilet to put some water, then brushed his teeth and wiped his face, grabbed the school bag beside him, and walked out of the house. When leaving, Chen Yu's footsteps paused slightly. He thought for a while, then suddenly pulled out a hair and stuffed it into the crack of the door. The hair is very hidden in the gap and is difficult to find, but once the door is opened, the hair will fall to the ground, so that if someone enters his room, he can definitely detect it. Chen Yu believes that since he has obtained such a strange thing, he may not be able to prevent himself from falling into some kind of whirlpool, so it is very necessary to maintain a vigilant heart for everything. Although he did not inherit the memory of this body, in the past 3 days, he also had a little understanding of the world, especially the location of the school. He also checked it out through the internet. Happening. At the same time, he kept recalling what happened last night. Last night, he used a bizarre notebook to create a bizarre story. Originally, according to his thoughts, he was only aiming for the deceased person next door to gain the rumor factor, but he did not expect that the final result was beyond his imagination. Li Deshun, who came back with a strange story, actually killed his own wife. Chen Yu can no longer trace the truth of the matter. He only knows that there are extremely deep secrets hidden in it, but these secrets are completely buried in the long river of time with Ji Furong's death. Why did the paper figurine disappear? Was it burned in the previous memorial ceremony, or was there another reason? Also, Li Deshun, who came back last night, is really Li Deshun himself. Or, it's just an alien with Li Deshun's skin on. Chen Yu doesn't know. He can't even prove whether everything said in the strange talk notes is true. All he knows is that since Li Deshun appeared last night, his strange talk factor began to increase rapidly. Contractor, Chen Yu, 13, lifetime, 0 reading, 0 strange talk factor, joy 130, anger 138, sorrow 219, resentment 171, fear 378. These values are still rising over time. Chen Yu stood in front of the school gate and silently looked at the notes in his hand. At this time, more than 9 hours had passed since he signed the contract with Wei Tan Notes, and he probably only had a dozen hours left to live. That being the case, let's exchange some lifespan first. Chen Yu thought for a while, and his heart moved, and suddenly the 5 items of joy, anger, sadness, resentment, and fear in the factor column were reduced by 100 points at the same time, while the reading column jumped from 0 to 1. 100 points of 5 strange talk factors. Can only 1 point of mind be combined? The smile on Chen Yu's face was a bit bitter. With a move in his heart again, that little thought was transformed again and returned to 0, and the lifespan column jumped from 0 to 1. Very good, I now have 1 day to live. Chen Yu's originally pressing heart relaxed slightly. He looked at the number 13 again. The number had not changed from beginning to end, which means that it was not the countdown of his life. As for what it was, further speculation was needed. Thinking of this, Chen Yu took a step forward and quickly walked into the door of the 5th university in H City. After spending a little time, Chen Yu successfully found the 3rd and 5th class of high school where she was. At this time, the class had started morning reading, and the whole classroom was full of people. Chen Yu deliberately came a little late. At this time, there were only 2 seats left in the classroom, one of which was in the 3rd row of the classroom and the other in the corner of the last row. Without any hesitation, Chen Yu walked directly towards the last row. The reason for this is because Chen Yu had already checked Yuanshan's grades on the student registration website. As he expected, this Yuanshan's grades were not very good. Strictly speaking, it should be extremely poor. The class counts down, so Chen Yu will choose the last row of seats without hesitation. In fact, Chen Yu really made the right bet. Although his appearance attracted several glances, no one showed a surprised expression even when they saw Chen Yu walking towards the back of the classroom. When he came to the seat and sat down, Chen Yu deliberately looked at the large stack of books left on the table. Well, that's right, they were all named Chen Yu. After successfully finding a seat, Chen Yu suddenly remembered that the class instructor Wang Feng had told him yesterday that when he came to school today, remember to go to his office to fill out a subsidy application form. This original body is an orphan with no source of income. He moved out of the orphanage at the age of 16. He lives on subsidies from the school and the community. This subsidy is extremely important for both the original body and the current him. However, I don't know where the office of the class director is, so I can only wait to find out between classes. Thinking of this, Chen Yu took a deep breath and felt the familiar atmosphere in the classroom that he had not seen for a long time, this tense and youthful atmosphere. The last time he experienced it was 4 or 5 years ago, when he was in high school. After thinking about his past for a while, Chen Yu began to look around. There are about 50 students in this 3rd-year classroom, and the layout is almost the same as his previous life. 2 old front and rear doors, large area casement windows that can be seen from the outside, and 2 blackboards on the front and back with slogans such as Sunshine, Unity, Diligence, and Learning, and the upper right side has not been opened for 10,000 years. Back to the TV box. In addition, all the desks are single person, but in order to save space, they are placed together in pairs to form 4 columns and 3 aisles. However, as he guessed, the original body did not have any friends, and he sat in the classroom for so long, neither at the same table nor at the front desk, and never talked to him. Chen Yu looked at his table mate. This was a boy with acne marks on his face and black rimmed glasses. At first glance, he was the type to study hard, and somehow he would be reduced to the treatment of sitting in the back row with him. Chen Yu didn't disturb the other party. He carefully took out the strange talk notes from his waist. Although the shape of this notebook was a bit dazzling, Chen Yu was not worried about leaving it in the rental house. The best way is to carry it with him. He looked at the cover of the strange talk notes. At this time, the 5 points in the strange talk factor column had increased a lot, and the speed was obviously faster than last night. Obviously, because of the arrival of the day, those relatives of Li Deshun began to talk. According to legend, the news of Li Deshun's corpse fraud was spread out last night. It's just that this spread is still too small, otherwise it wouldn't just increase at a rate of 1 point and 1 point. However, as if thinking of something, Chen Yu suddenly frowned. It's just outrageous, it's obviously a strange talk, why does the high points also increase? Could it be Li Deshun's enemy, seeing Li Deshun's death? Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. So he secretly having fun? These Chen Yu are really difficult to understand. After all, he is still a child, but at least he knows that 5 points can be combined with each other to convert them into thoughts that can be exchanged for life. This is a little tricky. Chen Yu has a vague hunch that the so-called weird stories in this weird story note don't just need to be scary, but to play with people's hearts in a deeper and more comprehensive way. No way. Thinking of this, Chen Yu put away the strange talk notes and took out an ordinary notebook again. It seems that I still need to analyze it well. Chen Yu bit the pen holder and wrote on the notebook, first of all, to create a word talk, at least the following factors are needed: definition, declaration, structure, trigger, and the most important word talk factor. Secondly, what I created is just the weird talk itself, and there is no evidence to prove that I have the ability to control the weird talk I created, so who is in charge of these weird talk? Again, after the strange talk is formed, a comment will be automatically generated from the notes at the end. There seems to be a lot of things hidden in the comment, such as the death of Ji Furong. Perhaps there is another inside story hidden in this matter. Fourth, does the strange talk have its own thoughts and wisdom? Fifth, the weird talk factor generated after the formation of the weird talk should be a manifestation of the popularity in the literal sense. The weird talk factor can only be obtained if the weird talk is spread out. Sixth, what is mind? Does it only redeem lifespan? And what is the meaning of the number 13? These 6 points are the issues that Chen Yu is most concerned about today. Chen Yu wrote down all the known and unknown questions in his heart, and tried to analyze it bit by bit. First of all, there is no doubt about the first point. He put a check mark on the first. Second point, I wasn't attacked by Li Deshun last night. Maybe it can prove that weird talk doesn't attack the creator. But in fact it didn't hurt anyone except Ji Furong. Maybe it didn't attack me, just because I wasn't on its attack list. Therefore, I can't corroborate whether the rumor will attack its creator. The third point, this is also the most important point, the comments generated after the creation of the strange talk do have hidden inside stories. If there is no such comment, I would have thought that Ji Furong was killed by me, but who can prove that this paragraph aren't the comments made up by the Quirky notes? Chen Yu frowned. However, it is very unlikely that the strange talk notes are made up indiscriminately. After all, it can be analyzed from the fact that the strange talk factor requires 5 emotions of happy, angry, sad, and fearful, and it is not just for killing. Therefore, it is very likely that Li Deshun was indeed killed, and it was his wife Ji Furong who killed him. Besides that, the words moths to the fire are hidden in that comment. This idiom is a bit like a clue in the comment. Does it mean that this weird talk can only be formed once? As long as after taking revenge, Li Deshun will also disappear. Or, the word fire in it means that Li Deshun is afraid of flames? If it is reversed and he is afraid of flames, there will only be that paper figurine in that morning hall. Does it imply that Li Deshun will be possessed by paper after his return? On top of people. Chen Yu couldn't help but recall that he had this association last night and realized that the paper figurine in the morning hall was gone. However, he couldn't explain this question for the time being, so Chen Yu placed a question mark on the third item, and then looked at the fourth item. Does Wei Tan have its own thoughts and wisdom? It cannot be proved that there is, nor can it be proved that there is no. This is Chen Yu's temporary answer. Strange talk is killing his life. Maybe it's just because Li Deshun has the last memory before his death, and memory does not represent thoughts. Maybe Li Shengyi is just a group of obsessions, or even something shaped by strange talk notes. Li Deshun is already dead. Of course, Chen Yu wouldn't kill him in one bite. Maybe it was Li Deshun who killed Ji Furong? Chen Yu put a question mark on the fourth item, and then looked at the next item. The fifth item is completely without any problems. Chen Yu ticked a tick. He can already confirm that the strange talk factor is related to the popularity. This point does not need to be questioned. As for the sixth item, he will have to wait and test it slowly in the future. The reason why he has this doubt is because if thought has no other effect, it can be directly converted into lifespan from the strange talk factor, rather than first converted into thought, and then use mind to exchange life. As for the number 13, it's definitely not the age, maybe it means that he is the 13th contractor of weird talk notes? Chen Yu shook his head, looking at these 6 items. His eyes gradually became empty, and now he has another doubt, that is, what is this world like? Before, he thought that this world, like the previous life, was just an ordinary world, but the appearance of the strange talk notes completely broke his cognition. At least I need to figure out, is it only me who has this supernatural power in this world, or am I just one of many supernatural powers? Of course, he has been conducting this kind of investigation for 3 days, but unfortunately, he has not found any clues about the extraordinary on the internet. Last night, he even went to investigate the strange rumors circulating on the internet, only to find out that there are very few ghost stories in this world, and it can even be said that the horror culture is very poor. For the definition of ghosts, people still stay at the level of physical attacks such as chainsaw massacres, human skin masks, deformed monsters, etc. Most horror movies are like this. Weird. And the belief in this world is that people go to heaven or go to the underworld after death, which is very monotonous and very simple. A world devoid of horror culture? For some reason, Chen Yu suddenly felt a little cold, and the more the world behaved like this, the more he had a bad premonition. Silently remembering the current doubts and clarifying the clues in his heart, Chen Yu tore off the page of analysis paper, slowly crumpled it, and threw it into the table bucket together with other waste papers. He still had to keep these waste papers. Dispose of it after school. However, when he put his hands into the table bucket, he suddenly felt a strange tingling sensation, as if something sharp was placed inside. Chen Yu looked down, but found that the table bucket was filled with foreign objects. 2 apples that were a little wilted, a box of Lover's Tears chocolates, some girly-looking snacks, and a bunch of paper cranes folded with colored paper. And the tingling sensation just now came from when the back of the hand touched Qinzai. This is... Chen Yu's expression flashed. He took out a pink 1000 paper crane, but saw that there seemed to be words on it, so he opened it little by little, and he found 3 small words like you. The fonts are graceful and agile, with a little rhythm of the pen, like a spirit jumping on paper, and even the pen and ink have a faint scent of ink, which is the smell of scented gel pens. Sure enough, Chen Yu couldn't help but look a little weird. He knew that the original body's skin was really good, but he didn't expect that a girl would actually come to confess. It seems that it's time for me to post a post on Boo, titled "What kind of experience is it to look like Edison Chen?" His thoughts broke down slightly, and Chen Yu shook his head quickly. At this time, he already understood that these Qinzai should be a girl who once had a crush on him, so he pinned his lovesickness on Qinzai. However, she didn't seem to dare to express her feelings, and it was only after she asked for leave that she put Qinzai on her desk. Chen Yugong wanted to put away all the paper cranes, but he found that some of the paper cranes had been covered with a fine layer of dust, and some were brand new. The production time of these 1000 paper cranes does not seem to be the same batch. Thinking of this, Chen Yu pulled out a new Qinzai and opened it gently. Why? The same beautiful font, Yuganshu www.yuganshu.com, the same fragrance type gel pen, but between the lines, there is a touch of doubt, a touch of bitterness, and the font has become a bit scribbled. Chen Yu raised his eyebrows. Did he guess wrong? These 1000 paper cranes were not put in at the same time, but in batches? Thinking of this, Chen Yu couldn't wait to take out 1000 paper cranes that looked the latest. This Qinzi crane was different from the past. It was actually filled with dense words. Chen Yu opened it with doubts, but then his breathing stopped. Go die, 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 die. The whole piece of paper was densely covered with shocking words, and the handwriting became messy. It seemed that the person who wrote this sentence was in a state of extreme resentment. Chen Yu was a little puzzled. These Qinzi cranes were different from old to new, and they were clearly not put into his table in the same batch. Could it be that the original body has never dealt with these Qinzi cranes? No, maybe I misunderstood. He quickly realized that these 1000 paper cranes were indeed stuffed into his table bucket in the same batch, and the reason for the difference between the old and the new was not because of the fact that the people who compiled these 1000 paper cranes only compiled one piece at a time. 2. And then save them, and use these 1000 paper cranes to record their ignorant secret love. However, as time passed, her mentality gradually changed. After she finally wrote down the content of Go to Hell, she stuffed all the kunzai she had saved from the beginning into her desk. From the shyness of the girl Hui-chun to the mad and messy killing intent, what have you done to make the other party so angry? Chen Yu unconsciously fought a cold war. Shouldn't I be hacked by a hatchet? Who passed these 1,000 paper cranes to herself? Why did she want to die by herself? Also, is there any connection between the person who sent the 1,000 paper cranes, this strange story notebook, and the hymn in the diary? A lot of doubts popped up in Chen Yu's mind. For him today, there may be some kind of fatal clue in it. Chen Yu couldn't help but raised his head and looked around, because he was in the last row of the entire classroom, and he could see the back of everyone's heads at a glance, and his move didn't cause anyone's reaction. No one is watching me secretly. Maybe the person who filled me with paper cranes is not in this class, or maybe it's another class. Chen Yu thought silently, then he took a peek at the books at his table, and then pretended to inadvertently asked, Wang Xiaofei, when I was away these 3 days, who secretly stuffed my table with something? Are you talking to me? At the same table, Wang Xiaofei turned her head suspiciously, and there was a hint of surprise in her eyes through the black-framed lenses, and then she looked at Chen Yu's table. You mean this pile of paper cranes? I don't know, I haven't noticed. Chen Yu keenly caught the sight of the other party, and he couldn't help asking, what? We've been at the same table for so long. I know I'm a little bored, but I don't need to react like this, right? You also know that you are boring. Hearing the words, the table mate suddenly showed a meaningful expression, and looked at Chen Yu carefully. What's wrong? Chen Yu bit the bullet and accepted the same gaze from the other party. Why are you looking at me like this? Nothing. The boy named Wang Xiaofei withdrew his gaze and turned his gaze back to his book. Laugh more in the future, it's good to be so cheerful. Chen Yu nodded and did not continue to ask questions. Although the other party's reaction was rather strange, Chen Yu could see that this person seemed to be a warm-hearted person who was cold on the outside and hot on the inside, and he didn't seem to know anything. However, I have more awareness of the introversion of this original body. I must know that I am introverted enough. I only had 2 or 3 friends in my last life, but I can still get acquainted with the people at the same table and the same dormitory, but this original body is more exaggerated. And his current performance is obviously not a small gap from that of Chen Yu in the past. It's just that Chen Yu doesn't have any hidden thoughts. Those who are familiar with the original body at most think that they have become more cheerful, but if they suspect that the original body is not the person, they still think too much. After all, no one in this world will always care about a person, and other people are not your father. Even if the sky is broken, no one will think that they have come through. Chen Yu can only say that he was thinking too much about the behaviors that he used to hide his head and show his tail at every turn through novels. It seems that he heard the conversation between Chen Yu and his table mate, and a girl sitting in front of him suddenly turned her head. Hello, Chen Yu. Chen Yu heard the words, raised his head and looked at the girl in front. This is a girl with a ponytail. There are some small freckles on her face and her face is too large, but they all say that there are no ugly girls in the 18th century. Although the adolescent girls are not good looking, but don't feel like a little girl next door. I heard that you have asked for leave for the past 3 days. The girl pursed her lips and smiled. Is your health okay? Good. Chen Yu's heart moved, and suddenly a shy smile appeared. By the way, I seem to have heard that some people in our class have also taken leave like me, right? Just as Chen Yu finished asking, he saw the girl's cheeks turn red, like a ripe apple, and at the same time, he lowered his head quickly, and his voice became as thin as a mosquito. Are you talking about Wang Bin? Listen, listen. The class instructor said that he seems to have changed schools. You've transferred schools? Are you going to transfer schools soon after the college entrance examination? Chen Yu raised her eyebrows, and silently wrote down Wang Bin's name in her heart. This name sounds male, could it be the he in the original diary? Chen Yu originally wanted to continue asking, but the girl in the front row quickly turned around with a blushing face after answering, and ignored her. You're shy, is that the reason for your laughter? Chen Yu looked thoughtful, then glanced at the vacant seat in the third row again, and asked the table mate beside him, Wang Xiafei, are you sure Wang Bin has transferred? How do I know that? I have no intersection with him. Wang Xiafei glanced at Chen Yu again speechlessly, and seemed a little helpless when Chen Yu disturbed her study for the second time. He hasn't been to the school for the past 3 days, so there's a high probability that he really transferred. Oh! Chen Yu nodded. In this way, the vacant seat in the third row was Wang Bin. He might be the previous contractor of the strange talk notes, but what seemed to happen that afternoon 4 days ago, the note was obtained by the original body, so he wrote the following paragraphs. So, according to the rules of the strange talk notes contract, Wang Bin is already dead? Chen Yu couldn't help but remember what the class guide Wang Feng had told her 3 times, and she became more certain of her guess, but, what happened that day? Seeing that the girls at the same table and the front row were completely ignorant, Chen Yu could be sure that when Wang Bin died, there were not many people around him, otherwise there would be no news of his death. And many more. But in the next second, Chen Yu immediately overturned his previous judgment. If the events that happened 4 days ago are represented by X, Wang Bin is not necessarily the previous contractor. His performance is also completely in line with one of the people present in the X incident. Like the original body, he also saw or heard something extremely impactful, so he made the move to transfer. However, whether he is a contractor or not, he is closely related to the X incident 4 days ago. These thoughts kept flashing through his mind. Chen Yu can now confirm that there are at least 2 parties involved in the X incident, one is the original body, and the other is this Wang Bin. Thinking of this, Chen Yu only felt that everything suddenly became clear. If Wang Bin is dead, it means that he is the previous contractor. If he is not dead, he must know the real inside story of the X incident, and what he has to do is to find out Wang Bin is enough. Thinking of this, Chen Yu immediately took out his mobile phone and rummaged through the address book to find Wang Bin's phone number, but unfortunately, he still experienced the isolation of the original body. In the address book on this mobile phone, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com, there is no such name as Wang Bin. He originally wanted to ask his desk mate directly, but seeing the other person's serious study, he finally held back and patted the girl in the front row who was talking to him just now. The girl quickly turned her head and made an inquiry. Tell me Wang Bin's phone number. He still owes me money. Chen Yu said these words with a shy face. I didn't expect to transfer to another school secretly. It's better not to waste my money. I don't have his phone number. The girl looked even more surprised, but she still shook her head innocently. Chen Yu, you have really become different. But at this moment, the girl's desk mate also turned her head, and she looked at Chen Yu with strange eyes. I have Wang Bin's phone number, I'll send it to you. It is good. Chen Yu nodded calmly and said at the same time, what's different, can you tell me? The girl at the same table in the front row was also a girl, but she was dressed in a neutral way, with short hair and fair skin, big eyes and thin lips, and she even looked a bit heroic. I saw her take out her mobile phone and said plainly, you have changed a lot. At least you don't usually gossip in class. Maybe it's because I'm in a hurry. After all, I'm too poor. Chen Yu smiled, and immediately felt his phone vibrate, and a text message came out from the notification bar. Monitor Zhang Xin, Wang Bin 188XXXXXX. Turns out, this is the squad leader? Chen Yu's expression flashed slightly, and then he smiled gratefully at the other party. Next, Chen Yu did not continue to speak, but quietly waited for the end of the morning reading. Contrary to Chen Yu's expectations, no teacher came to supervise the entire morning reading. It wasn't until exactly 8 o'clock that a brisk electronic music sound came out from the radio. Immediately, many students in the classroom stopped their morning reading, some turned around to talk to the classmates behind them, some picked up the kettle on the table and started drinking water, and some stood up and walked out of the classroom. For a time, the entire classroom became extraordinarily noisy. Monitor Zhang Xin. Seeing that the heroic girl in the front row stopped her morning reading and stretched out, Chen Yu immediately said, "I'm going to the class director's office. Do you have anything to send to the class director? I can help you take it with you." Zhang Xin turned around quickly when she heard the words, looked at Chen Yu curiously, and then took out a form from a textbook. "I really have it. This is the evaluation form for this week's Cotter. You can help me bring it to the class instructor." "Okay." Chen Yu took the form, but the moment he took the form, his eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly smiled. "By the way, do you know where the class director's office is now? I heard that he moved his office. Is no longer in the previous office. Who told you that the class director moved the office?" Zhang Xin showed a suspicious look. "Do not have it." Chen Yu shrugged and said helplessly, "I heard what the group said, maybe I got it wrong. He shouldn't have moved his office, he's still on the 5th floor of the office building." Zhang Xin was a little speechless. She looked at Chen Yu amusingly. "You don't have a fever and burnt out, right?" Chen Yu smiled shyly, did not answer, just stood up and walked out of the classroom. The moment he left the classroom, Chen Yu's expression immediately became solemn. He sniffed the application form in his hand, and a familiar scent entered his nostrils. "That's right, it's the same kind of ink fragrance. Could it be that the monitor Zhang Xin was the one who wrote the 1,000 paper cranes for me? I can't see it." Chen Yu sighed silently. A girl who looks so cheerful and outgoing would secretly write a love letter to the original body, and then want to kill him because of love and hatred? No, it's not right. Chen Yu's footsteps stopped slightly. The other party's expression was flawless, and there was no trace of admiration or hatred at all. If it was a disguise, it would be too much of an actor. Not to mention, in terms of handwriting, although he was not an expert, he could see that it was not the same handwriting. The monitor's handwriting is obviously childish, not as coherent as the handwriting on Qunzaihe. What's more, if those Qunzaihe were really written by Zhang Xin, why did she use a gel pen with such obvious flaws? Wouldn't I be able to spot it instantly? Unless, this is just a coincidence, there are many people who use this scented gel pen. Thinking of this, Chen Yu still didn't have too many clues. He just kept this derivation silently in his heart, and then came to the office building where the school's office is located. Climbing up to the 5th floor of the office building, Chen Yu just strolled around and found Wang Feng's class director's office. He knocked on the door, and a male voice came from the door. "Please come in." Chen Yu immediately pushed open the door, and suddenly saw a stout man raised his head and looked at Chen Yu with a smile. "Director Wang class." Chen Yu immediately understood that this person was class director Wang Feng, and he handed over the form with the same expression. "This is the evaluation form that class leader Zhang Xin asked me to give you." It turned out to be Chen Yu. The middle-aged man across from him chuckled. "I just wondered if your condition was getting better. Did you go back to school today?" "My illness is cured." Chen Yu nodded. "By the way, didn't you say there is an application form that I need to fill out?" "Yes, it's a subsidy application form." The middle-aged man took out a form from the drawer and handed it to Chen Yu, but when Chen Yu took the form, he suddenly sighed. "The class guide knows that it's not easy for you to live alone, and that kind of thing happened that day. So I specially applied to the school for this additional subsidy, hoping to help you." "Thank you class guide, I really need this." Chen Yu answered earnestly, and then filled in the items on it one by one, including the original name, birthday, ID number, etc., which he recited 3 days ago. Returning the completed form to the other party, Chen Yu just wanted to leave, but was stopped by the other party. "Wait, that thing, You didn't reveal it to anyone, did you? Wang Feng stared at Chen Yu, lowered his voice, and asked with a little scrutiny. Don't worry, class director, you should also know my character. Chen Yu replied obediently, I'm not a talkative person, and I don't want to have a bad influence on the school, so I will never say anything about it. After hesitating for a while, Chen Yu added, unless the police ask me. Hey! Hearing Chen Yu's assurance, Wang Feng showed a regretful look. Don't blame the school for deliberately concealing it, none of us want it to happen that day, but since it is irreversible, we can only try our best to compensate the family members, only please don't affect the reputation of the school. I understand. Chen Yu said it with deep conviction, and Wang Feng was concerned about a few questions about his studies before he was released. After leaving the office, Chen Yu's face suddenly turned gloomy. Sure enough, it's a big deal. Chen Yu deliberately added the phrase unless the police ask me in order to test Wang Feng's reaction. If Wang Feng asked in surprise, it's just a trivial matter, why did you alert the police, then Chen Yu would understand that the plot of Event X is not serious. But then Wang Feng did not show any stunned or amused expression, which meant that the severity of the X incident had indeed reached the point where it was necessary to alert the police. He has probably guessed what happened that day, but the school blocked the news in advance and wanted to deal with the parties privately, but from the other party's words, Chen Yu can basically be sure that the school does not know the deeper inside story, let alone strange stories. Presence of notes. Also, is that dead student Wang Bin? Chen Yu pondered silently, he hesitated for a while, and finally took out his mobile phone and dialed the number Zhang Xin sent him. If the other party is connected and you reading www.yuyuganshu.com is Wang Bin, Chen Yu can use various methods to ask what happened that day. And if it is Wang Bin's parents who are connected, Chen Yu can also ask questions as Wang Bin's friend to see if Wang Bin is transferring, sick or dead. And if you can't get through, the situation is much more complicated. Sorry, the user you dialed has been turned off. But unfortunately, the sound of a shutdown sound came from the other end of the phone. Chen Yu put down the phone speechlessly. In this way, the clue is disconnected again. In desperation, Chen Yu had to buy breakfast first, a piece of bread and a bottle of milk in the school store, and then return to the classroom. When returning to the classroom, Chen Yu saw several female students forming a circle on a table, including the monitor Zhang Xin and her table mate. Everyone laughed lightly from time to time and said, "Little daddy, idiot," and so on. Chen Yu glanced slightly as he walked by, only to see that the one standing on the table turned out to be a cat. A black cat with smooth and oily fur and two eye colors, yellow and blue. There are wild cats in the school. Chen Yu murmured curiously. This cat often appears in our class, haven't you seen it before? Hearing Chen Yu's muttering, the squad leader Zhang Xin turned around and asked, by the way, have you given the report to the squad leader? It has been given. The class instructor said you did a good job. Chen Yu replied. Thanks. Seeing this, Zhang Xin just turned around again and continued to feed the wild cats with breakfast. Chen Yu curiously looked at it a few more times, and after confirming that it was just a normal wild cat, he returned to his seat. Chen Yu silently memorized the handwriting on Qinzai, and every time he finished class, he looked at the seats of all the students in the class, but he did not find any too similar handwriting. Could it be that the other party deliberately hid his handwriting? It doesn't make sense. Chen Yu can understand after thinking about it carefully, the owner of Qinzai may have confessed to himself, but because the original body was too introverted and rejected the other party, so the other party wrote these curse words from love to hate. If that's the case, there's absolutely no need for her to hide her handwriting from the beginning before love turns into a curse. Moreover, Chen Yu also checked Yuanshan's diary, and no one in the diary had confessed to him recently. Perhaps, Qinzai has nothing to do with the X incident. What he needs most now is to understand the X incident. As long as he can be sure that no one in this world knows that he has obtained the strange story notes, then Chen Yu can be completely relieved. In the process of thinking and investigating, the time of the morning passed quickly, and Chen Yu did not gain anything. No, I can't continue to waste time. Chen Yu had to put the X incident and Qian's Hai aside first, and secretly took out the black-covered notebook when school was over at noon. At this time, the 5 strange talk factors on the cover have doubled, and they can be exchanged for another day, but Chen Yu was not too happy, but became more and more urgent. His heart seemed to be grasped by an invisible big hand. With only 1 day of life left, it was like a sword of Damocles hanging over his head all night, making him feel eager for quick success no matter what he did. Half of the day is about to pass, and I must come up with a strange story as soon as possible to prolong my life. Chen Yu pondered silently. In fact, if he was just talking about weird stories, he from another world could write dozens of non-repetitive stories in one go, but the key point was that the weird story factor limited his performance. If you write a powerful weird talk, you may get a lot of weird talk factors, but if you want to get it, you have to pay first, and now your weird talk factors can only be exchanged for 1 more lifespan. If you put all these weird talk factors into it, maybe the weird talk has not yet spread the word, the time has come. And if you choose to convert the remaining weird talk factor into lifespan, then the points for writing down a weird talk will not be enough. Thinking of this, Chen Yu only felt an indescribable irritability. He had to bet on the spread of a strange story, and he would live if he won, and died if he lost. No, you must keep calm. Chen Yu took a deep breath, looked at the empty classroom, and suppressed the urgency in her heart. I don't have much time, so the next weird story I write must be able to spread quickly, just like Li Deshun last night. It is best to have a lot of people around when it happens, so that I can get the weird story factor as quickly as possible. And many more. However, when he thought of a certain condition, his heart suddenly moved. Schools have always been the place where the most bizarre rumors circulated. Adolescent students have unlimited energy and are like a microcosm of society. There are rumors all the time. Isn't this the best place to spread weird stories? Thinking of this, Chen Yu really calmed down gradually, and began to recall the weird campus rumors he had heard in his previous life. 13 steps? No, it took too long, and the audience was too small when it happened. I didn't have that much time, and the weirdness factor wasn't necessarily enough. A 4-corner game? No, the world doesn't have the culture of 4-corner games at all, and no one will follow the rules of the game, so there is no way to trigger strange talk. And if he personally spread the rules of the game, let alone whether there is enough time, as long as someone traces it, wouldn't he be exposed? A portrait that can laugh? You can try this. There seems to be no portrait in the corridor of the school. It might be very interesting if a portrait appeared out of thin air. Chen Yu's eyes lit up, and after getting inspiration, his thoughts became smoother. In addition, you can also try to learn from the Japanese strange story of Hanako in the toilet. Although according to the description in the original book, that thing is completely a murderous monster, but the strange story is that the dead are alive, so I don't have to copy it all, just remove its killing rules. In this way, the cost of the strange talk factor will also be greatly reduced, and the generated strange talk will not threaten human life, which can be said to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Strange talk, it doesn't have to be dead people to count, and Chen Yu is not the kind of big villain who will kill people at every turn, all he needs is to survive. Thinking of this, Chen Yu opened the notes again, turned over the Return to the Soul on the first page, and grabbed the pen to the blank on the second page. After thinking about it, Chen Yu decisively wrote the words "portrait that laughs" on Wei Tan's name. However, just when Chen Yu had finished the draft and was about to start writing, the pen in his hand suddenly stopped. Wait, I seem to have selectively forgotten, in this world, has the country already noticed this notebook? This thought appeared like a flash of lightning, and instantly made Chen Yu's heart tighten, and cold sweat oozes out of his forehead. If the country or a certain force has long known about the existence of this notebook, then my ghost story last night and the portrait that can laugh, wouldn't it mean to tell the group of people that under the notebook? One of the masters is a student who lives in Minxian Li community and attends the 5th university at the same time. Is it because the urgency of life has made me forget to be cautious? Chen Yu only felt that his palms were shaking. Although this was just a guess, perhaps this notebook had never been exposed, but too many strange stories that appeared around him would still attract peeps from the dark. No, this strange talk must never appear by my side. Thinking of this, Chen Yu hesitated for a while, but still wrote on the note, name, a portrait that can laugh. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com Definition, paintings often entrust the will of the author. Declaration, when a painter puts too much effort into a painting, this painting has spirituality. Architecture, an unseen painting suddenly appeared in the corridor of the campus. No one knows who hung it, and no one knows whose handwriting it came from. When students pass by it, they often look at it until it smiles at you. Parameter, omitted trigger, the first university of Y City, Ziguo. That's right, in the trigger column, Chen Yu did not choose his own school, but chose another country. Not only that, he also hinted between the lines that the painting only appeared in front of the students, and the teacher could not see it. In this way, even if there were a lot of rumors, the official would only think that it was a prank among the students. And this time, Chen Yu intends to personally decide an image for it. Thinking of this, Chen Yu turned over the second page of the notes and came to the back of the second page. The pages of the notes are divided into two sides. The front has fields for name, definition, statement, etc. As long as the words are written into the fields, it can take effect, but there is only one field on the back, and almost the entire surface is blank, which makes it easy to use. It is the position for the contractor to design the image of the bizarre story. Chen Yu was originally an art student. In his previous life, when he took the joint entrance examination, his professional grades reached a high score of 95 in sketching, 98 in sketching, and 90 in color. A bizarre story that I intend to dedicate to this world. As Chen Yu picked up a pencil and began to compose the picture on the note, he first made a shape with a dotted line, and then with a few strokes, he sketched the bust of a person. Then, Chen Yu began to fill in the details. After an hour, Chen Yu looked at the painting on the note with satisfaction. Although he has changed his body, the instinct that penetrated his soul has not disappeared. It is a half-length portrait inlaid in a frame. The painting is of a woman, with her hands folded and half sideways looking forward. The composition is wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, with clear structure and distinct layers. It is standard at first glance. Joint entrance examination high score paper. What's more amazing is that this painting is clearly drawn with pencil, but it has a delicate texture unique to oil painting. Mona Lisa's smile. That's right, what Chen Yu painted was the Mona Lisa, which was very famous all over the world in the last life. It was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. Now, in this parallel world, Chen Yu has redrawn it. Of course, compared to the original work, Chen Yu's painting has no soul, but Chen Yu can use the strange story factor to give it a soul. After drawing all this, Chen Yu checked it out, took a deep breath, and put the strange talk notes together. Bang! With a light sound, the black-covered note was closed in Chen Yu's hands. He tilted his head and looked at the note silently, but the expected chill did not come. Instead, several large characters appeared on the notebook's cover. Insufficient points for strange talk factor. How come? Chen Yu was a little stunned. He looked at the cover again, and the most basic status bar appeared on the cover again under the feeling of his heart. Contractor, Chen Yu, 13, lifetime, 1 reading, 0 strange talk factor, joy 190, anger 318, sorrow 309, resentment 281, fear 418. My strange talk is related to laughter, is it because the points of high are not enough? However, in the first word talk, you only need 100 points of anger and 100 points of resentment to kill someone. I have 190 points of joy on my side, so why is it not enough? Unless... Chen Yu seemed to have thought of something. He opened the note again and looked at the trigger column. Could it be that because the location is too far away, strange talk notes cannot spread the weird stories abroad? After thinking about it, Chen Yu thought of these two possibilities, then he hesitated a little, changed the laughing portrait to crying portrait, and then changed the structure to when the students pass by it. Often see it crying at you. In the end, he revised the drawing again and turned it into a cry of Mona Lisa. After doing all this, he tried to close the note again. However, the result is still the same, and the cover reminds him again that he has insufficient points for the strange talk factor. It seems that it is indeed a matter of distance. Chen Yu murmured in a low voice, "This notebook does have a limit, you can only spread the strange talk near the notebook, beyond a certain distance, the consumption of the strange talk factor will increase exponentially." Thinking of this, Chen Yu slightly changed a few words in the trigger column again. The number 1 University of Dongguo City A. This school and Chen Yu's school are both located in the same country. The difference is that the two cities are separated by 3,000 kilometers. This is also Chen Yu's intentional attempt to connect the distance and the strange talk factor points in the strange talk notes. Then, Chen Yu tried to close the note again. However, the results still show that the strange talk factor is insufficient, and it is obviously still too far away. It's not that Chen Yu is in trouble with the school, it's just that most places can't compare with the campus in terms of the density of the crowd or the speed of information dissemination. In order to gain greater popularity, Chen Yu has only this choice. Then, Chen Yu pulled the distance little by little. From city A to city B to city G, all of them showed that there was not enough weirdness factor. In the end, Chen Yu had to write down the words of the first university in H city, Dongguo. Although it is in the same city, it is different from the Yeji No. 5 college where Chen Yu is located. The No. 1 college is far stronger than the No. 5 college in terms of college entrance examination rankings and teachers. It can be said to be a key school in H city, and it is also a wealthy person. A gathering place for talented students. Moreover, the fifth university is located in the western suburbs of H city, while the first university is located in the eastern suburbs, and the two are only about 10 kilometers apart. Immediately, Chen Yu closed the note again. Bang! After a light sound, Chen Yu finally felt the deep chill from the notes. Judgment: the above conditions are met, the definition is true and exists, there is no causal conflict between the definition and the statement, the number of strange factor points is sufficient, and the structure and trigger have no logical conflict. Execution: after a 10-second countdown, the strange story of the portrait of a crying will take effect. Seeing that the strange talk notes in his hand finally took effect, Chen Yu was not happy at all, instead he couldn't help frowning. The tales created can only take effect within the same city limits. This undoubtedly increases the chance of being exposed. It seems that no matter what he does in the future, he must be more careful. By the time Chen Yu finished all this, it was time for the lunch break, and students began to enter the school one after another. Chen Yu glanced out the window, and then looked at the cover of the strange talk notes again. Strange talk factor: joy 192, anger 320, sorrow 11, resentment 290, fear 435. This. Chen Yu remembered that in the past 2 hours, the points of all the strange talk had increased somewhat. It should be because the returning soul last night was still exerting its strength, only AI had decreased by nearly 300 points. Looking at the new data, Chen Yu was confused. He guessed that his strange talk was related to sorrow, so he spent the grief points, but he didn't expect to spend so much. Compared with last night's resurrection, it has tripled. I obviously didn't give the opponent any power. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. This weird talk can only cry, but why does it consume more than return to the soul? Chen Yu was puzzled. What is the difference between these two strange stories? Thinking of this, Chen Yu immediately opened the note, and sure enough, under the drawing he drew, a line of comments appeared again. Crying is the expression of human emotions, but have you ever seen a portrait that can cry? When tears can't soak the ink, maybe you should try another way, a crying portrait another way. Chen Yu was a little stunned. This comment again gave Chen Yu a strange feeling. If you say that you are creating weird stories, then these comments seem to be describing the way of cracking weird stories? Last night's ghost talk was like this. Chen Yu still remembered that there was an idiom fighting moths into the flames in the ghost talk last night, and the paper figurine representing Li Deshun had indeed disappeared. At first, Chen Yu thought it was being burned, but he was sure that he had not smelled the burning after being in the room all night. And today, the implication of this comment is far more obvious than last night. It is a reminder that water is ineffective for that painting, and only fire can burn down the painting. Moreover, these comments are very reasonable. They are completely based on the logic of Chen Yu's compilation of strange stories, and follow the flow to prompt the cracking method. Fire can burn out most things, including paper and paper paintings. So, the criticism is actually describing the way to decipher these weird stories? But who is it talking to? Shaking his head, it was already the afternoon class time. As the class bell rang, Chen Yu slowly closed the notes and returned to the image of a diligent student again.